Welcome to Monarchist Minute. I'm your host, William Stout, and today we have a big turnout on our panel. We have Vice Chancellor Kremitz Magnolia as usual, but we're also joined by
Hello.
George's. Oh, hello. We're also joined by George's P from the Ideology Committee, formerly known as Watercube.
Hello.
We're joined by Leon Krowski, also known as Lionheart.
Hello.
And coming back from last week, we have Tobit von Lude. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for the introduction.
Yes. Tonight, thanks to some very, very interesting things that might be clickbait or might not be, we actually do have a pretty interesting topic to talk about. The idea of America joining the British Commonwealth. Now, Clements, you're the one that pointed it out, so would you like to introduce the topic?
Sure, you have to forgive me. My vocal cords are a bit shot right now. But okay, hold on. Someone else.
Alright, Lionheart.
So, if my memory serves me correctly, earlier today on the 24th of March, King Charles and President Trump floated the idea of the United States becoming an associate member of the Commonwealth of Nations, otherwise known as the British Commonwealth. That is the furthest extent of my knowledge as of right now, unfortunately. To my knowledge, at least for technically, it wouldn't give the United States much gain out of purely the fact that the Commonwealth of Nations does nothing to begin with. But that's my cynicalism talking. Maybe George wants to take over.
So basically, judging by what I'm understanding from this, is it's primarily would be a diplomatic showpiece, just kind of a show of solidarity with our British cousins, or nothing more.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. Again, I mean, even if we were to become a full member of the Commonwealth, it's not like there's much for us to do. The Commonwealth of Nations today really only talks about the need to preserve democracy and human rights, despite many of its members violating those principles every day. But what can you do?
So what exactly is the difference between an associate member and a full member?
To my knowledge, it would be about voting power or something similar, just like how the Vatican and Palestine are treated in the United Nations.
Wait, so they do actually hold internal voting, or?
Yes, but I think a good example would be back in the 1980s when there was a whole showdown over apartheid in South Africa, and Margaret Thatcher, as the leader of the UK, was the only member to hold out against trying to sanction South Africa because of it.
Anyone else have anything they want to add?
To my knowledge, I could be entirely wrong on this, but to my knowledge, don't the Commonwealth nations have like a special trade deal going on? So wouldn't that kind of help our trading situation with the upcoming tariffs?
Again, to my knowledge, I'm not. I didn't do any knowledge beforehand. I should emphasize, but to my knowledge, it's not necessarily like an automatic thing, especially again as an associate member. But it would most definitely, again, as William pointed out, it would be a diplomatic move as a show of stronger ties between the United States and primarily the Britain and Canada.
Which, given that those are our two most loyal and closest allies, until Trump opened his fat mouth, that is, that would make sense. But given how Trump has pushed Canada's buttons lately and has been increasingly hostile with Europe, it's would be interesting to see what they would say in return.
Yeah, of course, it'd be interesting. Again, I mean, if anyone else has any opinions, I mean, I love it because of the idea of it, but I mean, once you take 5 minutes back to like step back and look at it, what's the real gain out of it? You know?
I suppose you could say, in a way, our movement would gain, because
Well,
when people think of the Commonwealth, what do they think of? They typically think of the nations under the king. They don't usually think of the associate members. And I feel like, even if it is diplomatic, if people do end up accepting it, they're probably going to be at least more likely to be more open to the idea of monarchism. So that's a possibility.
well, yeah. I meant more so of like in the because of how my studies and everything and my career, I'm looking at more so the benefits of the states, the U.S. government, the UK government, etc., etc. Not necessarily like of the broader strokes, but most definitely it could make people more interested or aware, I guess, of monarchy, especially Americans.
The only thing I could think of is it's probably like a detente with Canada after us antagonizing them. Like that'd be one of the benefits, but that's still just diplomatic.
Well, yeah, I believe the fact that, you can point out to the fact that it was King Charles who had to make the move. I mean, granted, he is the head of the Commonwealth, but because of how the British monarch has such like a reserve power and function, it shows how desperate the situation is for Canada and Britain.
Does the Commonwealth have any like? I know like Australia and New Zealand work together militarily, but does like the Commonwealth have anything that is like similar
No.
to?
No.
Okay, because I'm
Again,
also thinking like possible alternatives to NATO, because NATO seems like it's on the way out, at least U.S.
Again,
involvement.
You have to remember that it's the Commonwealth is not purely just like the dominions or even like the realms that still recognize the king as the head of state. This is most of the former members of the British Empire. So we're talking about the Federal Republic of India, almost all the like new African republics, etc., etc. And there is no explicit trade benefits. Let alone a military agreement.
Yeah, no, for some reason I thought there was like it was something that was proposed. It looks like I probably just misremembered, probably because of Wargame Red Dragon, where it's a faction.
It's possible. It's possible we can open up to something more, but as of right now, I very skeptical.
Well, speaking of NATO, do we have any updates on that? I know Europe passed a $1 trillion rearmament plan.
We should have talked about research before this. I would have done my fair share.
I can't.
Oh, sorry, go on.
Oh, thank you. I can't really offer any partial, but I can state my solemn opinion on this. And full disclosure, this is not an opinion sanctioned by the United Monarchist Party. I don't think we have an official opinion, but I just want to make sure. But NATO, in effect, is the American Empire. It is how we exert our authority over Europe in a way. And I know there is economic ways we do that too, but primarily NATO is our empire. So I think when Trump talks about, no, we need to leave NATO, they don't pay their fair share. Of course they don't. We're the empire. They're the subjects. I'm sure there are many more posh types who would probably go against that, like, oh, no, we need to respect you, yada, yada. Where's the empire?
One thing I want to say on that is like, yeah, they might be like our subjects or whatever, but they are bad subjects. Like France dragged us into Vietnam, a place that we had no right really being. Like, same goes with how they kind of screwed over all our diplomacy in Western Africa, along with still subjugating Africa, getting us involved in new world squabbles, like maintaining like debt payments with Haiti. Like same goes with the Germans. Like my late father, who was pretty high up there military wise, he used to joke about like needing to withdraw from NATO because they just do not pull their fair share. Like,
And I'm of a similar opinion as you, George, is where it's like, yeah, it's our empire and there are vassal states, but they are worthless vassal states.
They get all the quality of life. Like, it's better to be a regional power than a world power sometimes, I'm going to be completely honest. because you can actually focus internally compared to having to basically spend a lot of your influence maintaining a large trade network and maintaining control and authority in those regions through both economic pressure, military presence. Like, the money put into the Ramstein Air Base in Germany could do wonders for infrastructure back home.
I mean, I agree with you guys. I think all of us here at least do. The European states, for the most part, not all of them, most of them are worthless as vassals. I mean, even if NATO is the empire, then first off, everyone's saying that the U.S. pulling out is a bad thing. That they go against themselves, because then they're saying, that it's like somehow America's the evil empire, but we need the American empire still, which makes no sense. And then again, what do we get out of the Europeans? They don't give us money to begin with, so the most basic line thing is already negated. I mean, the only benefit, quote unquote, is the strategic advantage against Russia, and it's that alone, in my opinion, is not worth enough.
Now, also with that, like, most of the time Europe starts getting their own interest as a power when they start unifying, which NATO presence allows them to do without much issues. Like, we've kind of helped prop up the EU for as long as it's done. And as France and Germany gain more power inside the EU, they're going to get their own interest. It's why there was the whole pipeline with Russia. They're going to start looking elsewhere to be their own power, because that's what they always do. It's like the British and the French trying to drag us into trying to do the whole Suez crisis, where we had to step in with the Soviets and say, hey, you guys aren't allowed to have an empire anymore. You lost empire privileges.
Well, I think that one's that's different though. The Suez crisis specifically, but I should have mentioned this. But no, I get it. But I remember back in the 1950s. I forget the name of the competitor, but the guy who ran up against Eisenhower was making this point. The Republican going up against Eisenhower, not the Democrat, and he was basically saying the bizarre relationship is that the American taxpayers have to pay for that Europeans can live luxuriously, but then the Europeans completely lose any say in their own politics, because then it's like the quote military industrial complex taking over. I mean, who benefits out of this relationship? It's not the average American, and I'm not sure if it's really that good for the Europeans.
It's pretty good for the Europeans. There's a reason why Denmark has really high quality of life. We uphold their social democracy.
I meant government, so the independent, the sovereignty, I guess. No, I'm very aware that the average European has a much better standard of living than the average American.
Yeah, they trade freedom for security, and we trade our livelihoods for their safety. And security.
Again, no benefit for us.
I think you could say, though, if you'll grant me this, I think you could say, if our leaders were more cunning, and maybe this is what Trump is trying to do, and maybe I just need to respect the process, but if we would be more cunning, we could probably turn our overlord status over them. We could probably start pressing that, forcing them to start, paying more for defense, and that looks like it is happening. We could probably start forcing them to be more cooperative in trade, making lives better for us. And if we were to finally gain the monarchy, we could probably even officially one day turn them into province.
I don't really see that happening. Like, the budget, yes, but here's the thing. The European Union already has a splinter in its paw with Greece, and how China is looking like the better trading partner than the United States. We've already lost the economic battle. Everyone's trading with China.
We kind of... You can look and you can compare Trump's first term to now, and you can most definitely tell in his first term, he had his administration had these undertone beliefs and principles with trying reforming our relationship with Europe. But you can see now, especially after the whole Russian invasion of Ukraine, and now it's desperate times call for desperate measures. We can't trust that the Europeans to just voluntarily do anything anymore. Yeah. I remember, and I'm so it's unfortunate Clement's left for some reason, but I remember Trump being mocked by the leaders of France and Germany and all of them, saying, why would we increase our spending and stuff? The Russians aren't going to invade us or anything. There's no reason for us to not transition from Russian gas to some alternative. I know the Germans were all big about that, and then after Trump, leaves in 2020, and after the Russians invade Ukraine in 2022, the Germans are like, oh my God, what are we supposed to do? Because now they've got themselves by the a noose around their neck.
And let them hang themselves.
Europe's better when it's fighting amongst themselves, so they can't project outwards. Whenever they do get their shit together as well, if it's not under American tutelage or literally any foreign power, and they're unified for their own interests, it tends to end badly for the rest of the world, in my opinion. Especially with how the French still are as they are, same with the Germans.
I think you're giving, I don't know, maybe this is my own sympathies for France showing, but I feel like France shouldn't get as much BS as some of the other countries, particularly Britain. I mean, I have
Central African franc still being a thing, same with the Western African franc, is enough of a crime.
I can respect the French for still trying to do their own independent foreign policy, even if they change it every president. As schizophrenic as the U.S. does. I mean, Britain just gave up, though. Britain gave up, and then everyone else in Europe just didn't even have a chance.
But France didn't, because France doesn't trust anyone, and France definitely didn't trust the U.S.
Leaving NATO and then coming back hat in hand. Thank you, Charles de Gaulle.
No, that wasn't on de Gaulle, though. That was on the fact that de Gaulle lost his own power base. He got forced out.
I'm gonna blame de Gaulle either way. I don't like the French.
It's de Gaulle was the last great hope France has had since, in my opinion.
The last great hope the French have had, it was Napoleon the First.
No, that wasn't that was peak. You could argue that was peak or just after peak, but de Gaulle was the last improvement on the long decline down.
I just kind of have a seethe in my heart towards French policy in Western Africa because I was a big fan of Thomas Sankara.
But anywho, if NATO does collapse, what are some things we think could happen in Europe? First thing that comes to mind is that, panic in Europe, with France being the only nation that's actually militarizing I think it's going to come down between France and Poland being the two largest militaries on the continent, Germany being the money, but
I think you're making the assumption already that the Europeans are going to immediately go to war against themselves if the US isn't there, or if NATO doesn't exist. I think you've already made that assumption.
Well, I'm not saying they'll immediately go to war with themselves. Of course they're not going to immediately go to war on themselves. The EU is going to have to eat itself first. But one of the big things I think is going to happen is if they try to force federalization of the EU, the first thing we're going to see is nations like Poland jump out and leave, because Poland's not going to want to surrender its sovereignty again, and that's going to cause a bunch of issues in Central and Eastern Europe.
Most of the European countries don't want to do that. I mean, one of the big reasons why we've seen the quote-unquote rise of far-right populism and nationalism in Europe in the past decade is because they these individual countries keep losing power to the EU. I mean, the whole migration crisis there, it can be pointed to the EU, not necessarily any individual government. Well, obviously there's exceptions Angela Merkel's Germany, but the EU is the one sanctioning Poland and Hungary for not allowing all these migrants from the rest of the world to come into them.
Oh, I just saw something interesting. Apparently, we have a new update from the YouGov poll about monarchy in America.
Okay. Could you share the link, please?
Oh, never mind. I just misread the date. Sorry. False alarm. It's the same one.
Is it the one that says over a quarter of people our age are monarchist?
Yes. Or fake monarchy is good.
Oh, I also wanted to point out, and I forgot about this too, is that like we just saw in Romania like a couple weeks ago, like it's like most popular like opposition leader just get like denied, any possibility of election, standing for election again. I can't remember if he's been arrested or not, but he's been disbarred by the EU to run in his own country as a candidate.
On what
I mean,
ground?
on the grounds that he might be like a far right like a psychopath or like a Russian agent.
I love how we're now having an investiture crisis over like elected officials because the EU has decided to be its own weird HRE.
Hold on,
The
hold on.
Chinese are gonna have a field day.
Now,
Like-
here's my only problem with that, and I've always had an issue with this. It's the notion that democracy is conditional on the right people getting elected. But that's just me.
No, you're right, because it completely goes against its own like philosophy and principles.
Yeah,
That
but
the
like,
idea that the common man can be elected by among themselves and like make the good decisions.
as it
they've
turns out, the bourgeois republics are for the bourgeois, not for all people.
Imagine that.
Fucking burgers ruined everything.
Yeah,
I blame Marquis de Sade for all this.
The sadist?
Yeah, the sadist. I don't know. I've been like looking over, like I read one of his quotes recently about like the Republican era coming in and how it's just gonna lead to death. And he's like, "You want this, you sick fuck? I know that in my heart."
It's like, imagine being such a messed up and horrible human being that they name the entire concept of getting pleasure out of other people suffering after you.
He is like the perfect like summation of Jacobin excess, though. Like he's kind of just perfect for that.
Yeah.
Let me grab the quote actually.
Hey, you know what though? Maybe that means he's gonna get a little bit more pleasure out of where he went.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. The limit experience shows this.
Didn't he die during the revolution from like syphilis or something?
Died as he lived, a true soldier.
He died on his principles.
Died
Respect.
lived by the sword, died by the sword.
I do like it. I do want to come back to your point, George, about the about China benefiting the most out of this. I think the argument is like it's a reasonable one. It's one we should keep in mind, but we should also keep in mind the whole like one of the chief reasons why the Trump is doing all this is so that we can pull out of Europe to focus against China in the Asia Pacific.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, he already kind of ceded Taiwan by tariffing them for the microchip production, right? Or whatever it was. Like, the one thing Taiwan does to keep its economy afloat. And Taiwan cannot defend itself because it built a surface fleet for some reason.
No, but
Hopefully they're investing heavily in submarines, though.
I think they just started. It was like, for a while, they were only building surface fleets and losing all their simulations against the Chinese.
the interesting thing with like with Trump, and he's done this in both his terms, is that he'll use tariffs as like a bargaining chip, and we've seen that it worked before, back in like 2017 to 2020. I'm not gonna say it's always gonna work, but for Taiwan, what's the alternative then, if not the U.S.? They're gonna bow down to the like mortal enemy, the communist China, who wants to see them completely eradicated. I mean, what's the choice then? The idea is that Taiwan will give us a better deal with the microchips, so that I mean, we're not gonna pull everything out of there, but he wants us to have like a more advantageous trade policy vis-a-vis Taiwan.
I don't think, though, like, it's not that the Chinese want to destroy Taiwan, though. They just want to reintegrate them. It's the old...
But I'm talking about in terms of governments. They're going to completely eradicate the Taiwan government.
Kind of. They'd probably just integrate them into the existing weird third parties the Chinese have in their national coalition, like how they were able to co-opt democracy in Hong Kong. Yeah, the people won't be happy about it, but wait a couple of years, because the Chinese government thinks in terms of centuries, not in terms of decades, or even election terms.
I don't think that is what happens, because for Taiwan to be integrated, that mean that the Taiwan's never willingly going to integrate. So for it to integrate, it's going to have to be invaded by the mainland. Now, if the mainland does that, what incentive do they have to put it into one country, two systems whole deal. They're not going to do that. They want the power.
Yeah, and Hong Kong did not have its own independent government. I mean, it was still part of like the UK and the British Empire. I mean, they might have had local elected officials, but I mean, it was with all like the diplomatic channels. It was all like a transfer of territory.
But it still took up the two systems, one China policy. Like,
yeah, and we've also seen in like the 30 almost the 30 years since then how China has completely just like repudiated that agreement in any good faith, and it's just also a facade.
yeah,
Everyone's seen it, so therefore, why would the people of Taiwan believe that China would actually, not betray them, not betray this deal?
With the same hesitancy that they don't have the same faith towards America, just like Europe lost their faith in the United States as well to be a rational actor geopolitically. Because we are also schizophrenic because we change our tune every 4 years.
Oh, I'm very aware of that. But again, I mean, it's even Trump. Trump isn't also like he's not waking up every day and he's like he has like multiple personalities disorder. I think maybe this is me just being very overly sympathetic. Again, I'm not. It's unfortunate Clemens is with us to be like that devil or the angel on my shoulder. But I think he sees the problems with our foreign policy and the fact that it kept changing. Under Obama, under Bush Jr., under Clinton, etc., etc. And so he's trying to radically reshift it to be more coherent. And part of that is because of how incoherent our foreign policy was, is that there has to be changes. There has to be shocks to it. Otherwise, it's still going to be like, a person with scoliosis.
The issue is that even if you try to change it, like it still plays into like the postmodern governance we've seen for the last like 20 or so years, where it does constantly shift. Because the reason why it constantly shifted because we don't have any grand narrative to latch onto. Like just being anti-China and fighting for them for influence isn't really enough to completely reshift and have that stick. Like even if he became like Cadillo and ruled until he died, there'd still be some schizophrenia present because of just the demands of the influences of those who are influencing Trump, like the people that are reliant on it. He's reliant on economically, and they're reliant on him for power. Like Elon Musk comes to mind as a more direct example.
But I know what you mean. I've made the argument before. Like I don't mean to cut you off. No, sorry, but it's I've made the argument before. As much as it's a bitter pill to swallow or whatever. That like Trump is like close to like a medieval feudal king, in which he's on the throne, and that's really what he's concerned about more than anything else. And so he'll allow people like Elon Musk, like JD Vance, etc., to be the royal courtiers, fighting for power and fighting for his influence over him, and setting the policy.
Well, they're all also on the same side for like the neo-reactionary movement.
Well, yeah, again, I mean, it's part of the royal court system. I mean, the all consistency.
Reactionary.
Wait, what?
Said I wish they're reactionary. That means they're probably much more inclined to monarchism.
Well, I mean, like the neo-reactionary guys that more just want like postmodern, like cyberpunk, but with feudal aesthetics on top of it.
Yeah, they want like the CEO monarchy stuff.
CEOs are like monarchs. FDR was also like a CEO. I believe in cathedrals. These are completely different from Marxist superstructures. Trust.
Yeah.
I treasure the day that when old Bug finally gets his neo-feudal postmodernism, he'll be a serf instead of the intellectual he thinks he'll be.
I'm sorry, he has Peter Thiel backing him. It's over for us already. We've already lost. We're in the Ravenna court period of Rome right now, and we're watching, instead of the Catholic Church being the new institution, it's Facebook.
Who's Peter Thiel? I'm sorry.
He's the guy who runs the private security organization called Palantir.
Palantir?
Yeah, like the evil like visage thing from Lord of the Rings.
I can see everything.
And he's also the guy who backed JD Vance's House of Representatives and Senator run, I believe.
Oh.
This guy is influencing the U.S. government heavily towards the neo-reactionary, like, Hopian capitalism. Hopian,
yeah, that's it.
Which I don't think really turns out well for anyone.
No.
It's not even... It doesn't become monarchy. It just is a corporation that pretends to be a monarch. It like if I changed the LLC title from being president to monarch, that doesn't make me a lord of my own. There's none of the form.
And that's why a while back I brought up the whole concept of like anarcho-capitalism is not the ideology of corporations. Liberalism is the ideology of corporations. Anarcho-capitalism is the ideology of the upstarts that can't bully their way into the market.
And I think it is the ideology of the corporations depending, because like again, Thiel, Musk, the PayPal mafia guys are up there, but they want to just have the right to own people again.
Well, I think if you look at it, it's the ideology of insurance companies, because that's what the anarcho-capitalist wants. He wants the insurance companies to take over. They think that the insurance companies will protect them because it's cheaper to just have your clients not be robbed than pay out on the insurance claim. And because why would the hell would you trust your defense?
All I'm hearing is like this is essentially the return of the medieval guilds with a vengeance.
Yeah,
I wish it was
that actually is perhaps the best way to explain it. The return of the guild system with a vengeance.
It's not even a return to the guild system though, because the idea here is that like it's not even like the bourgeois republics or like it's bourgeois as sovereign, so everyone gets their own little like British East India Company.
Oh god.
Oh yeah.
That's terrifying to think about.
So it's not even a return to like pre-capitalism. It's not a return to like the feudal system where you have the artisans that actually, you know, provided value. No, it's now slop like algorithm feeds that have armies behind them for some reason.
You know,
because Curtis Yarvin was jealous of like the jocks getting the girls in high school. I think he like literally wrote that down in one of his works. I don't remember. I remember just seeing like weird seed in there.
Hey, since we're on the topic of the whole libertarians and the neo-reactionary, why don't we talk about why libertarianism is dumb and doomed to fail if it were ever to get in power?
Does it need to be explained though? Like if someone's already on this podcast, they already know how like libertarianism is not the moves.
I feel like we've gone over this before too. No offense, but I feel like there's no way we've not covered this at some point.
Well, have you gone into the depths of what would cause it to fail?
I view libertarianism the same way I view communism, is that it's so like convoluted that it's essentially just going to become a dictatorship and collapse in on itself.
Then yeah, you have.
The problem with libertarianism is, as Einhard said, the same problem with communism, the same problem with anarcho-capitalism, the same problem, well, with liberalism and democracy in that matter, is that they all operate on the assumption that people are fundamentally good.
No man, unalive is good.
Yeah.
Except
to which I have to say is absolute bullcrap, and the only ideology or the only principle that actually gets it right is capitalism, and because capitalism says people are inherently self-interested.
Yeah.
That's also like classical liberalism too, though. That's like John Locke and all that.
Yeah, it's like self-interested to be invested in the social contract, so I will not go murder my neighbor.
The problem is we've entered the point in modernity where we're throwing the social contract out the window because people are greedy.
Thank you, neo-reactionaries. I think it was Peter Thiel who said that we need to rethink the social contract, or was that the ChatGPT guy? Or they both said it at some point.
I just want my Silicon Age collapse to happen. Now, I might be a monarchist, I might be authoritarian, but I definitely follow the whole Dune thought process, the thought process behind the author of Dune. I forget his name right now. Someone help me out.
You mean Timothy Chalamet, whatever his name is?
No, the guy who wrote it, the original
Frank
book.
Herbert.
Thank you. But yeah, I kind of follow the Frank Herbert thought where while mankind loves peace, stability, and order, we desperately need and crave chaos in order to function. So, as much as it sucks, I'm still waiting on that next societal collapse. I call it the Silicon Age collapse or the digital age collapse. And the idea, basically, is that as more and more of society goes into this super hedonistic state fed by the digital world, something's eventually going to give. And when it gives, everything's going to come crashing down.
I think I have
Brother,
for it.
Oh, sorry, you go first.
The crisis of the 21st century.
Basically, yes.
But we're already there, brother. We already have the behavioral sync ready in swing. Like, we are all neurotics. Like, I've been reading Byung-Chul Hall's Burnout Society, and he makes some good points. Mostly about how we live in such an achievement-based focused society, mostly caused by, like, how we interact with technology and how we interact with grand narratives, which we don't anymore. Nothing has a defined meaning because of postmodernism. We just burn ourselves out to destruction or give into hedonist excess. That's activity that's supposed to be profitable, but at the same time is not. It's activity for its own sake. Like, we're entering the
Right.
apocalypse, and I'm so ready to start my rice kingdom and then die of, like, measles.
Right. What I'm saying is, what we're waiting for, the linchpin to really set things off, is all this technology we're dependent on, all this technology that these tech bros are cyberpunk overlords depend on for their power and wealth. Something needs to happen that absolutely positively threatens it. In the same way that a shortage in the supply of tin threatened the supply of bronze during the Bronze Age collapse.
This reminds me so much of that one episode. I think it was like I can't remember. It was one of the episodes from Rick and Morty where all he did was change like the worth of like the Galactic Federation dollar from like 1 to 0, and the whole Galactic Federation just collapsed in on itself.
Well,
Yes.
I think what's going to be the crisis, because this is another issue I thought about, is that another reason we've stagnated as a civilization is because of mutually assured destruction. The threat of nuclear weapons means that conflict can't occur, and therefore there's no contest of powers between the great nations, and we're stuck in the eternal status quo. Now, being that we're in the digital age, what I think is going to happen is the increased development of electromagnetic weaponry is going to eventually rapidly skyrocket once somebody decides to finally take that step, and then we're going to have an EMP arms race.
But don't we already have, like, that kind of going on where, like, nuclear weapons can just be used as EMPs anyway, which kind of defeats the whole purpose?
Well, I'm talking like EMP, the power of the EMP, but without the, blow everything down.
No,
I
like, if you do
understand.
it in the atmosphere, like, nukes just act as EMPs. That's one of the
That is-
things, like, Joint Task Civil Support had to practice for in case there was a specific EMP, not nuclear attack, using a nuclear weapon.
Well, yeah, I know that's how high atmosphere detonators work, but yeah, I'm just talking like use of EMPs tactically.
I
Not
think it's already began in the background. I mean, I don't keep up with the news about that, but I remember the longest time, years ago, I'm pretty sure it was still like before Biden, there was like Havana syndrome, and it was like a bunch of like U.S. diplomats like across like Central America were like having these like bizarre illnesses that were completely disabilitating them. And I remember rumors all the way back then that it was like some kind of like a supersonic weapon.
Crowd control has been getting a little crazy as well with sound, I think. Is that the one you were talking about with, like, in Serbia?
I'm sorry, you talking to me or to him?
You.
Oh yeah, I'm pretty sure it's happened. It's expanded outside of Havana itself, where it's named. I remember Serbia was a place about last year or the year before.
There's one recently where they used, like, supersonic noises to disperse crowds. And, like, it's also been, like...
No, I get
I'm
what
sorry.
you mean, and I think those that can fall under it too, if not in like the exact name, but then in the commonalities of it.
Sound is warfare. Like...
It's more like human directed warfare. Like instead of destroying like everything, like William was talking about with like nukes, It's more so attacking purely just humans, so that all the infrastructure is left intact.
What,
Yeah.
like a neutron bomb?
I'm sorry, what?
Like a neutron bomb?
I guess something like that.
Well, what I was thinking was more like small portable devices that you could say carry around on like small enough to be carried by a human being and then could be set off in specific locations to cripple digital infrastructure, like setting one off near a server farm for like Google and then wiping
Oh, okay.
the internet.
I mean, in
That's what I
fairness,
mean
we could
by
just send in like
tactical.
we could send in like the CIA or COT6 or something and just take down whole like servers like that. Even
Yeah,
like our
like,
own grid system is so vulnerable here in the US.
Yeah, there's a
that's
reason why
all-
Autumn often tries to target it every couple of years with a bombing or something to
Yeah,
start the race
exactly.
war.
Yeah, and that's another thing I know about because that's something we went over in one of my engineering classes. Because electrical engineering is part of what I do. Is how vulnerable the power grid is, and it's just like that could be the linchpin if somebody actually wants to set out. Of course, I'm not encouraging it.
No, you're just making the realization of the group that George mentioned did like years back, and that's why they always try to bomb the grid system every other year.
Like,
for
no
a
one's
race war.
protecting that thing. Like,
No,
bad things
yeah,
can just
yeah,
happen. We're
yeah.
always like one bad day from total collapse, and I don't think we appreciate that much because we tend to like avoid and ignore death at all costs.
And
Yeah.
here's the thing, my professor told me this explicitly. It doesn't even have to be like hitting all of the power server, like all of the power controllers.
You just got
If you hit the right substation, and granted, we don't know which substation it is, but if you hit one specific substation, you'll wipe out all the power grid in North America.
oh damn.
That's terrifying.
That one substation. God forbid someone find it.
One small sacrifice, and we can bring about
Huh?
paradise now.
On the
So yeah, that's what I'm talking about. The Silicon Age collapse won't be brought about by all it'll take is one dude with a backpack EMP in that substation or walking into say Google. Like if he has a backpack EMP, he doesn't even have to get past security. He could walk into the lobby and set it off in the lobby.
It'd be like Walter White with the laptop.
Exactly.
speaking of electronic warfare, I do think the neoliberal order is currently building its strongest weapon, and I think it is a hell of a weapon. It's going to kill us all.
What is it?
AI for the purpose of doing business.
Well, AI, it's not gonna matter if they take down the grid system.
Yeah,
AI is just it's not gonna
Let's think.
be active.
I wouldn't put that on the neoliberals either. I just would put that solely on the tech oligarchs, like
Well, yeah, but who do you think the tech are fighting with? You know,
neo-reactionaries.
I feel like we all on this podcast agree that the tech oligarchs are both
they're
the
hyper nerds.
greatest. They're the greatest threat, yet they're a mild annoyance in our 21st century society.
God bless the schizophrenic modern age of capital.
Yeah.
Like
They are okay, and the reason that they are both so minuscule and yet so powerful is because their entire power base is intangible. Their ability to control the real world is only based off of their ability to command and control the digital world.
And we've allowed the digital world to become like actual reality in so much for us.
I know, but it's like the only thing we have to do to break their power base is to basically break the to just remind people of how intangible that power is. We have to
We have to like reveal the man behind the curtain.
yeah, but like the big issue with that is that also kind of would cause the collapse of capitalism as a whole and as we know it, because you would undermine the value of the dollar, which has just become this idealist conception. Even if you go back to the gold standard, it's already over.
You act like that's a bad thing.
Okay, then
I know, okay, I just want to say if we're
at that point we're already on the fast track to be like, cooked.
I guess we just gotta debase all things, guys. Shrug.
It's like We're talking about butchering the sacred cows here, Georges. Nothing's off the table.
Oh, I have Bate in my hand. Do you really want to press that button?
Oh, no, put down the bouquet.
What do you have?
Bate is a philosopher from from around the 1920s to the 1950s from France. And some of his prescriptions were like summarizing the accursed share, where there's a part of the economy that can either go to great abundance or great destruction, and it has to be used without profit.
I love that. Like a couple months ago, I began this one law class, and my law professor, in the first week, said, if you remember nothing else from this class, remember this: never trust any French or German philosophers. Period.
Always trust the French and German philosophers. I love Heidegger, and I love Bate.
Every schizophrenic philosopher is French or German. Period.
The only philosophers from Europe that I like are the philosophers of the sword manuals.
You see, there's only one thing from one philosopher in Europe that I've ever taken, and I don't read any of the others because I don't want to become dogmatic. And that one thing is what Socrates said. The only thing I know for certain is that I know nothing, and that's something I remind myself every day. That's it.
That's like the Bate quote.
Fair.
Anything that makes you laugh is true.
I don't get it. I don't. I'm sorry.
Well, it should make you laugh in both sadness and in joy.
Anywho, we should probably wrap this up. Does anyone have any final thoughts?
Never trust French and German philosophers. Period.
If I speak, they shall censor me.
My final thought is remember, tech bros, power only goes as far as the Wi-Fi signal. Tobit, you got anything?
Embrace third wave Ludditism. That's all I'm gonna say.
No, I wouldn't go that far.
Hey, that's my ideology, man.
I'm no Luddite. I live in Ohio. I hate Luddites. The bloody
You hate yourself. You live in Ohio.
The bloody Amish are a scourge.
Nah, not that. Yeah, we should talk about that sometime.
Luddites were the first socialists, low key. More power to them, I guess. Go fight for the workers' rights against the bourgeois while they're trying to replace you with tech.
Alright, anywho, let's wrap this up. Please bow your heads and join me in prayer. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us of our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thy is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Thank you for joining us this evening on Monarchist Minute. We hope to see you next time, same place. If you're watching this on YouTube, like, comment, and subscribe. If you're listening to this on another streaming service, hit follow or whatever it is that it's called to get the notifications. Follow us on social media. If you want to get involved, shoot us an email or shoot us a message and ask how you can get involved, or join us on Discord. Until then, may God bless you. May God bless the United States of America. Thank you and good night.